The afternoon sun was warm, shining down on the small city as children poured out of the school gates, laughing and chatting with friends. Among them was a quiet girl, a black teenager with bright eyes and a calm smile. She carried her books pressed close to her chest, as if they were a shield, and walked carefully down the sidewalk. Unlike her classmates, she did not linger, joke, or stop for snacks. She walked straight home, her steps steady, her head slightly lowered. It wasn't that she didn't want to join the fun, but she had always felt different from the others. Her name was Lila. She was smart, polite, and thoughtful. Teachers often praised her for her work, but classmates sometimes whispered behind her back. Some thought she was too serious, too proper, as if she was carrying a secret. Lila often brushed it off. She knew who she was and where she came from, but she had been told many times by her mother to keep things simple and private. Walk like everyone else, her mother would say. Do not let the world see your full story until the right time. Lila respected her mother's words, because her mother was no ordinary woman. She was the mayor of the city. But Lila never bragged about it, never told her classmates. She just wanted to live a normal life as much as possible. That afternoon, as she walked past the town square, she felt the eyes of two police officers on her. They were standing near their patrol car, leaning against it casually, sipping coffee and chatting. Their eyes followed her in a way that made her feel uneasy. She tried to focus on the pavement, her heart beating a little faster. She had been taught to always respect authority, to answer politely if ever questioned. But there was something sharp in the way these officers looked at her. She wished she could disappear into the crowd of people passing by, but her school uniform made her stand out. "Hey, you there," one of the officers called out suddenly. His voice was loud, making heads turn. Lila stopped, her grip on her books tightening. She turned slowly to face them, trying to hide her nervousness. "Yes, sir," she replied softly. The officer walked closer, his partner following behind. "What are you doing around here?" he asked, his tone not curious but suspicious. "I'm just going home from school," Lila said. Her voice was calm, but inside she felt her stomach twist. The officers exchanged glances. "From school, huh?" the second one said, raising an eyebrow. "You don't look like you belong around here." Lila swallowed hard. "This is my way home," she answered. People around began to slow their steps, watching the scene unfold. Some shook their heads, but no one spoke yet. The officers loomed over her, their questions sharp, as if they were trying to find fault where there was none. "Do you have any ID?" the first officer asked. Lila hesitated. She had her school card in her bag, but she felt her hands shaking as she reached for it. She pulled it out carefully and handed it over. The officer glanced at it, smirked, and handed it back without even reading the name. "Looks fake to me," he muttered, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. A few in the crowd gasped, some whispered, but no one stepped forward yet. Lila's cheeks burned. She wanted to defend herself, but her voice stuck in her throat. She thought about calling her mother, but she remembered her mother's advice: stay calm, stay respectful, no matter what. So she simply said, "It is real, sir. That is my school card." The officers didn't look convinced. They circled her slowly, their eyes cold. The tension was rising, and Lila could feel the weight of every eye on her. She tried to stand tall, but she was only a young girl, facing two men in uniform who carried authority in their very presence. The first officer stepped closer, his voice dripping with arrogance. "What are you hiding, girl?" he asked. "Why do you look so nervous?" "I'm not hiding anything," Lila whispered. She wished her voice could be stronger, but her heart was pounding in her chest. The officer chuckled, shaking his head. "They all say that." At that moment, The crowd grew larger. More people had stopped, some lifting their phones to record quietly. There was an air of unease, a sense that something was about to cross a line. Lila shifted on her feet, clutching her books tighter, praying silently for the moment to end. But instead of stepping back, the officer leaned forward, his eyes filled with something more than suspicion. It was a test of power, of control, and he enjoyed having all eyes on him. The second officer folded his arms, watching, as if waiting for his partner to make the next move. Lila thought of her mother again. She thought of the way her mother spoke at city meetings, how her words carried strength and calmness even in the face of anger. She thought of the way her mother always reminded her, "You are stronger than you think." But standing there, with the officers pressing her, she felt small, fragile, and powerless. Her lips trembled as she whispered again, "I just want to go home." The officer tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he didn't want to solve. The silence stretched between them, heavy and sharp, until it was broken by his cold laugh. He reached out and pushed at her arm lightly, testing her reaction. Lila flinched, pulling her books closer, her eyes filling with tears. The crowd gasped again. A woman in the back shouted, "Leave her alone." But the officers ignored her. For Lila, every second felt like an hour. She wanted to run, but she couldn't. Her feet were frozen in place, her heart pounding louder than the noise of the city around her. She looked around, hoping for someone to step in, someone to speak up. But everyone seemed frozen, too, caught between fear and disbelief. And so, the first part of her story was set. A young girl, walking home quietly, had been stopped, judged, and humiliated for no reason other than the way she looked and the authority of those who thought they could do whatever they wanted. Lila did not know it yet, but this moment, this awful experience, would not break her. It would instead set the stage for something far greater, something that would shake the very foundation of the people who dared to underestimate her. Her day had started like any other: school, books, the walk home, but now the air was heavy, and her life was about to change forever. The silence in the square felt heavy, as if the whole city had stopped breathing for a moment. Lila stood frozen, her books clutched tightly against her chest, her body trembling, but her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. She had always been taught to be calm, to hold herself with dignity, but this was a test she had never imagined facing. The officer's cold stare made her feel smaller and smaller, while the second officer simply crossed his arms, watching, almost amused. The crowd grew restless. Some whispered angrily, others simply stood in shock. A few brave people quietly recorded on their phones, but no one yet dared to step closer. Authority in a uniform carried power, and many feared challenging it. The first officer leaned down, his tone sharp and filled with arrogance. "You think you can just walk through here without answering properly? You're hiding something. I can see it in your face." "I'm not hiding anything," Lila said softly, her voice trembling. She hated how weak she sounded, but her heart was racing too fast for her to steady herself. She wanted to scream, to demand they let her go, but her mother's words echoed in her mind, "Stay calm. Stay respectful, no matter what." The officer's smirk deepened, as though he was enjoying this uncomfortable performance in front of the crowd. He tilted his head and then did something that made the entire street gasp in shock. With a quick motion, he pulled at her skirt, lifting it slightly in a cruel, humiliating gesture. A sharp gasp escaped Lila's lips as she grabbed at her skirt and pushed it down quickly, her face burning with shame. The world around her blurred for a second as her tears spilled over. The crowd erupted into murmurs, shocked and angry. Someone shouted, "Hey! That's not right." Another person's voice rose, "What are you doing? Leave her alone." But the officers stood firm, pretending they had done nothing wrong. The first one shrugged, saying with a mocking tone, "Just checking if she's hiding something." "Why so nervous? Lila's whole body shook, but a spark lit inside her heart. For the first time, she realized that this wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been treated unfairly, every child who had been silenced because they were young, or because of the way they looked. She wanted to fight back, but her lips stayed shut, her pride holding her still. The crowd's energy changed. What started as whispers now grew into loud voices. A woman near the front, who had watched quietly until now, stepped forward. She was dressed in a simple blouse and jeans, but her eyes burned with anger. "Stop this nonsense right now," she shouted. "She's just a schoolgirl. What's wrong with you?" The officers turned, their arrogance breaking for a moment. "Ma'am, stay back," the second officer said, raising his hand. "This doesn't concern you." But the woman didn't move. She stood protectively between Lila and the officers. "You've gone too far," she said firmly. "This is abuse of power, and we're all watching." The crowd cheered softly at her bravery. More people pulled out their phones, lifting them higher now, no longer afraid to record openly. The officer who had humiliated Lila shifted uneasily. For the first time, he realized he had crossed a line too visible to deny. But instead of admitting his mistake, he straightened his shoulders and sneered, trying to hold on to the power slipping from his grasp. Lila, still clutching her books, looked up at the woman who had stepped forward. Their eyes met for a brief second, and in that moment, Lila felt a warmth she hadn't felt since the incident began. Someone was standing up for her. She wasn't completely alone. The officer's voice rose sharply again, as though volume could cover his guilt. "Everyone here, calm down. We're just doing our job." But the words rang hollow. People shouted back, "That's not your job. We saw what you did. Shame on you." The air grew thick with anger. Even cars slowed down, drivers leaning out their windows to see what was happening. The scene in the town square was no longer a quiet encounter. It was becoming a public scandal. Lila's breathing steadied as she realized the shift. She still felt broken inside, humiliated, but a thought pushed into her mind: they don't know who I am. These officers believed they could intimidate her, humiliate her, and walk away without consequences. But she carried a truth they could not imagine. Her mother wasn't just any parent, she was the mayor, the leader of the city, the very authority above these officers. Lila's lips trembled as she tried to find her voice. Part of her wanted to reveal it right then, to see the shock wipe the smugness off their faces. But another part of her held back. Timing mattered. Her mother had always said, "There is a moment to speak, and a moment to wait. Know the difference." So she waited, even as her heart pounded harder, even as the humiliation still stung. The woman who had stood in front of her turned back to check on her. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Lila nodded faintly, wiping at her tears. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she wasn't fine at all. Suddenly, the sound of engines filled the street. Black cars with tinted windows turned the corner and pulled up sharply near the square. The crowd turned their heads, murmuring. The doors opened, and men in black suits stepped out, moving with quiet urgency. Their presence shifted the entire atmosphere. People recognized the look of security detail. Serious, alert, and professional. The officers froze. Their arrogance faltered as they glanced at each other nervously. One of the men in suits scanned the crowd and immediately spotted Lila. He rushed forward, his expression concerned. "Miss Lila, are you all right?" he asked in a low, urgent tone. The crowd gasped again, this time in surprise. The officer's eyes widened in confusion. "Miss Lila," the first one repeated under his breath. For the first time since the encounter began, Lila straightened her shoulders. She no longer felt like a powerless girl. She was the daughter of the most powerful woman in the city. And now, the truth was beginning to slip out. The crowd murmured louder, realizing they were witnessing something bigger than just a confrontation between police and a schoolgirl. Whispers ran through the air. Who is she? Why do they know her name? What's going on? Lila took a deep breath, her tears drying on her cheeks. She looked directly at the officers, her voice quiet but strong. You don't know who I am, do you? The officers stiffened. Their mouths opened, but no words came out. The crowd leaned closer, sensing the reveal was near. And in that moment, the entire balance of power shifted. The girl they thought they could humiliate was not just any girl. She carried a truth that would bring their arrogance crashing down. What began as an act of cruelty was now turning into a lesson they would never forget. The sound of the black cars stopping at the square made everyone turn their heads. Doors opened quickly, and tall men in black suits stepped out, their movements sharp and professional. Their serious faces showed they weren't ordinary people. They were security officers, the kind you only saw near important leaders. The air in the square shifted immediately. The crowd went quiet, waiting, sensing something important was about to unfold. Lila stood frozen, still holding her books, her eyes red from tears. One of the suited men, taller than the rest, spotted her instantly. His face changed from stern to worried as he walked straight through the crowd. Miss Lila, he called softly, his tone filled with urgency. Are you okay? The crowd gasped. Miss Lila. The officers blinked, confused. Their proud stance faltered. They looked at each other, trying to understand what was happening. The tall man gently placed a protective hand near Lila's shoulder, as if to shield her. The other suited men spread out, forming a protective circle. Whispers ran through the crowd like wind in tall grass. Who is she? Someone whispered. Why are they protecting her? She must be someone important. The first officer, the one who had humiliated her, cleared his throat and tried to keep his voice steady. What's going on here? Who are you people? He asked the suited men. But his question carried no confidence anymore. It was shaky, filled with the fear of the unknown. The tall man didn't even glance at him. His focus was only on Lila. Please, Miss Lila, say something. Are you hurt? Lila looked up at him, her lips trembling. For the first time since the ordeal began, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. Someone was here for her. Someone who knew who she truly was. She shook her head faintly. I'm okay, she whispered. But her voice carried both pain and strength. The officer's arrogance began to crumble. He stepped back a little, sweat forming at his temples. His partner shifted nervously, his arms falling from the confident fold they had been in. The people in the square started to record more openly now, holding their phones higher. They knew they were watching a story that would spread far beyond that moment. Then, the sound of one more car door closing echoed across the square. The crowd parted, and silence fell again. From the last black car, a woman stepped out. She wore a tailored suit, her hair neatly tied back, her presence commanding without her saying a single word. She walked with quiet authority, every step strong, steady, and filled with purpose. The crowd recognized her instantly. The whispers turned into loud gasps. It's the mayor, someone shouted. That's the mayor. The officers' faces drained of color. Their eyes widened in panic. They quickly straightened, but it was too late. Everyone in the square knew the truth now. The girl they had mocked, humiliated, and accused was none other than the mayor's daughter. The mayor did not look at the crowd, nor at the officers first. She walked directly to Lila and wrapped her arms around her. The hug was tight, protective, and full of love. Lila dropped her books and held onto her mother, finally letting herself cry into her shoulder. The square was silent again, every person watching with awe. After a moment, the mayor slowly released her daughter and turned her eyes toward the officers. Her gaze was sharp, unyielding. The officers shifted uncomfortably under her stare, as if they wished they could vanish. "What," she said slowly, her voice calm but heavy with authority, "have you done to my daughter?" The first officer opened his mouth, stammering, Mayor, we were just what?" The mayor cut in, her tone icy. "Just humiliating a child? Just abusing your power in front of the very people you swore to protect?" The officer's mouth closed. He had no answer. His partner stepped back further, lowering his gaze, ashamed. The mayor's voice grew louder, echoing through the square. "You think the uniform you wear gives you the right to strip dignity from the people of this city? You think fear is the same as respect?" The crowd erupted in cheers and claps. They felt her words deep in their hearts. Many had lived moments of unfairness themselves, and now they saw someone finally speaking the truth in public, someone powerful enough to make change. Lila stood beside her mother, her tears drying, her strength slowly returning. She looked at the crowd, then at the officers, and finally at her mother. For the first time, she felt proud that the truth was revealed. She was no longer a quiet schoolgirl being humiliated. She was the daughter of the mayor, and she carried dignity that no one could take away. The officers tried to defend themselves again. We thought she was suspicious," one muttered weakly. The mayor raised her hand sharply, silencing him. "Suspicious," she repeated. "For walking home from school? For carrying books? Or is suspicion only in your eyes when you see the color of her skin?" The crowd roared with support, some even shouting, "That's right. Tell them." The mayor's security officers stepped closer, but she motioned them back. She wanted everyone to see this, to hear it clearly. She wanted the lesson to be loud enough to echo in every corner of the city. "You have disgraced this uniform today," she continued, her voice steady. "And you have shown the people what kind of officers you are. You do not deserve to serve the city." The officers lowered their heads, knowing their careers were finished. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and within minutes, the videos would be all over the internet. Lila stood straighter now, her mother's hand resting gently on her shoulder. She looked at the officers, her voice quiet but firm. "You treated me like I was nothing," she said. "But I am not nothing. No child is nothing." The crowd cheered louder than ever. Some had tears in their eyes. Others held their phones higher to capture her words. The mayor turned once more to the officers. "Leave," she ordered. "You are suspended from duty as of this moment. You will answer for this." The two officers didn't argue. They couldn't. They turned and walked away slowly, their heads down, the proud swagger gone from their steps. The crowd parted, watching them go with disdain. When they were gone, the mayor bent down slightly, picking up Lila's books. She handed them back gently, brushing her daughter's hair back with her hand. "You are brave," she whispered to her. "Braver than you know." Lila held her books tightly, her chest lifting with a deep breath. She felt stronger now, standing beside her mother, surrounded by the support of the crowd. The fear and humiliation were still there, but something greater had risen above it: pride, dignity, and courage. The square buzzed with energy. People clapped, some even chanted the mayor's name. Others turned their cameras to Lila, speaking softly to each other about how brave she had been. Lila glanced around, and for the first time since the ordeal began, she didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel powerless. She felt seen. She felt strong. And though she hadn't planned for her identity to be revealed in this way, she realized something important. Sometimes, truth comes out at the most unexpected moment, not to hurt you, but to lift you higher than you thought possible. That day, standing in the square with her mother beside her, Lila took her first step toward understanding the power of her voice. The square was still buzzing with whispers and cheers when the mayor, standing tall beside her daughter, turned back to the crowd. Her eyes swept across the people gathered there, men and women, young and old, workers and students. Each of them had seen the truth with their own eyes, and each of them carried a phone that had recorded what had happened. The weight of the moment was bigger than just two officers and a girl. It was about the whole city and what it stood for. The mayor raised her hand, and the noise softened. "Thank you for standing here," she said firmly, her voice carrying clearly. "Thank you for not turning away. What happened today is not just about my daughter. It is about every child in this city who deserves to walk home safely, without fear, without humiliation, without being treated as less than human." The crowd clapped and shouted in agreement. People who had once been silent found courage in her words. Some nodded with tears in their eyes, remembering their own stories of unfairness. Lila stood close to her mother, her heart still pounding. She could hardly believe this was real. The entire city square filled with people, cameras pointing at her, her mother's strong words echoing through the air. She had always tried to live quietly, to blend in, but now everyone knew who she was. And instead of shame, she felt a sense of strength building inside her. The two officers, who had been ordered to leave, were still lingering near the edge of the square, unwilling to face the humiliation of walking through the angry crowd. But the mayor turned toward them again. "Do you think you can hide now?" she asked sharply. "You showed your faces when you thought no one would question you. Show your faces now, when the truth is clear. Let every person see who you are." Reluctantly, the officers stood where they were, heads down, their pride shattered. The crowd hissed and shouted at them, but no one touched them. It was punishment enough to be seen in their disgrace, their cruelty exposed under the sun. The mayor stepped forward, pulling out her phone. She dialed a number and spoke calmly, "Chief of Police, this is the mayor. I need you here now. Two of your officers have committed an unforgivable act in front of the public." She paused, listening to the stunned reply on the other end. "Yes," she continued, "bring the proper officials. They will be suspended immediately." The crowd cheered loudly at her words. The mayor slipped her phone back into her pocket and turned to Lila, placing a steady hand on her daughter's shoulder. "This city is watching," she whispered softly, only for Lila to hear. "And today, we will make sure justice is not just promised, it is done." Lila nodded faintly. She still felt small compared to the scale of what was happening, but she also felt a spark of pride. She had endured humiliation, but now she was standing at the center of change. Minutes later, another set of vehicles arrived. This time, it was the chief of police himself, accompanied by several senior officers. Their uniforms were neat, their steps hurried, their faces pale as they approached the mayor. The chief bowed his head slightly. "Madam Mayor, I came as soon as I heard." "What happened here?" The mayor gestured toward the two officers. "Ask them what they did. Or better yet, ask the people." The chief turned toward the crowd. Voices rose instantly, people shouting the details, pointing fingers, showing videos on their phones. The truth was undeniable. The chief's face darkened with shame. He looked at his men, shaking his head slowly. "You have dishonored this badge," he said quietly, but the crowd still heard every word. He turned back to the mayor. "They will be taken in immediately for questioning. They will not wear this uniform again until further notice." The officers lowered their heads further, knowing their careers were gone. The crowd erupted in cheers again. For the first time, the people felt justice unfolding right before their eyes, not hidden behind closed doors. But the mayor wasn't finished. She turned back to the people, her voice steady and strong. "What happened today is painful, but it is also powerful. Because now, the truth is in your hands too. Do not stop speaking. Do not stop recording. Do not stop demanding fairness. Today, it was my daughter. Tomorrow, it could be any of your children. And we must make sure that no child ever has to face what she faced. Her words settled deeply in the crowd's hearts. Some people clapped slowly, others raised their fists in agreement, and still more simply nodded with determination in their eyes. Lila, standing beside her mother, took a deep breath. She remembered how powerless she had felt just minutes earlier, when she thought no one would help her. But now, she felt the opposite. She felt the power of voices, the strength of unity, the dignity of truth. She looked at her mother with admiration, seeing not only the mayor but the woman who had always told her, "You are stronger than you think." The media had arrived by then, cameras flashing, microphones being held out. Reporters called out questions, their voices loud and urgent. "Madam Mayor, how do you feel about what happened to your daughter? Lila, do you want to say something to the city? What will happen next?" The mayor glanced at her daughter, then leaned closer to her ear. "Do you want to speak?" she asked gently. Lila hesitated. She was nervous, her hands still trembling, but she saw the cameras, the people waiting, the silence that had fallen again. She knew this was bigger than her. It wasn't just about her skirt being pulled or her tears in the square. It was about dignity, fairness, and standing tall even after being brought low. She stepped forward slowly, her mother's hand still resting lightly on her shoulder. She looked at the crowd, her voice soft but steady. "I just want to say, no child should ever be treated the way I was today. Not me, not anyone. We all deserve respect. We all deserve to walk home safely, no matter who we are." The crowd cheered wildly, clapping and shouting her name. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every word. Lila felt her heart pounding, but she also felt something else, a sense of release, as if the weight of humiliation had lifted from her shoulders and turned into courage. The mayor hugged her again and whispered, "I'm proud of you." By evening, the videos had spread across the internet. News channels replayed the moment when the officers humiliated Lila, followed by the mayor's powerful confrontation and Lila's quiet but strong words. The city was buzzing. People gathered in homes and cafes, talking about what had happened. Some were outraged, some were inspired, but all agreed on one thing: the day had changed something in the city. The power that some thought they could misuse had been challenged publicly, and the voice of a young girl had become the spark for justice. And as Lila sat at home that night, curled on the couch beside her mother, she realized something important. She had been afraid, humiliated, and nearly broken, but she had not been defeated. The truth had come out, and with it, a lesson for everyone. She whispered quietly to herself, "I am not small. I am not nothing." Her mother, hearing her, smiled softly and placed a hand over hers. "No, my daughter," she said. "You are everything the city needs to see." That evening, the city was alive with conversation. The videos taken in the square spread faster than wildfire. On social media, millions of people shared them with captions like "Justice in Action" and "The mayor's daughter stood strong." News reporters replayed the moment when the mayor arrived, the sharp words she used against the officers, and the quiet but powerful statement from Lila herself. What had started as a humiliating afternoon had turned into a story that reached far beyond the city streets. At home, Lila sat curled up on the living room sofa, a blanket around her shoulders. The house was filled with a calm silence, but her heart was still heavy with the memory of the afternoon. She replayed the officer's mocking tone, the way the crowd had gasped, the sharp sting of humiliation. For a moment, she closed her eyes and thought, what if my mother hadn't arrived in time? What if no one had stood up for me? The thought sent a shiver through her. Her mother entered the room quietly, carrying 2 cups of warm tea. She placed one in front of Lila and sat beside her. For a moment, they didn't speak. They simply sat together, the quiet hum of the city outside filling the air. Finally, her mother said softly, "You were very brave today. Lila shook her head. I didn't feel brave, she whispered. I felt small. I felt like I couldn't do anything. Her mother reached over and gently held her hand. Courage doesn't mean you never feel afraid. Courage means you keep standing, even when you are afraid. You did that today. You faced cruelty with dignity. And when the time was right, you spoke the truth. That is real strength. Lila listened quietly, her eyes lowering to the cup of tea. Slowly, her lips curved into a faint smile. She wasn't sure if she truly believed she was strong, but hearing her mother's words gave her comfort. The next morning, the city woke up different. On the front page of every newspaper, there were pictures of the square. One showed Lila clutching her books tightly as the officer loomed over her. Another showed the moment the mayor hugged her daughter. And another showed Lila speaking into the microphones, her eyes filled with tears but her voice steady. The headlines read, Mayor's daughter stands against injustice and public humiliation turns into lesson of dignity. At school, Lila felt nervous. She had always tried to keep her life simple, blending in with the other students. But now, everyone knew who she was. When she entered the gates, whispers spread quickly. Some students stared at her with wide eyes. Others gave her small nods of respect. A few even clapped quietly as she walked past. Lila blushed, lowering her gaze, unsure of how to handle the sudden attention. In class, her teacher paused at the door and said, Lila, we are proud of you. The class clapped again, and though her cheeks burned, she felt a warmth in her chest. For the first time, she wasn't being whispered about for being different. She was being recognized for her strength. Meanwhile, the two officers were facing consequences. They were officially suspended, their badges taken away. Investigations began immediately, with the police chief promising that justice would not be delayed. The story spread to national news channels, where people debated about power, respect, and dignity. The incident had started a conversation that could not be silenced. That evening, the mayor held a press conference. Lila sat beside her, nervous but steady. The cameras flashed, and the mayor spoke clearly, "This is not about me being the mayor. This is about every child, every woman, every citizen who deserves respect and safety. My daughter's experience yesterday revealed a wound in our city, a wound of arrogance and misuse of authority. We must heal it, not by silence, but by action." She turned to Lila and gently touched her shoulder. "My daughter has something to say." The room fell silent. All the cameras pointed at Lila. Her heart raced, but she took a deep breath. She remembered the humiliation, the tears, the fear, but she also remembered the moment she found her voice. Slowly, she began to speak. "I never thought something like this would happen to me," she said softly. "I was just walking home. I didn't want trouble. But what happened wasn't just about me. It was about how people are treated when others think they can get away with anything. I want everyone to know, no one should be treated that way. Not because of how they look. Not because of where they come from. Not for any reason. Everyone deserves respect." Her words, though simple, carried power. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed non-stop. People watching at home felt their hearts stir. A young girl, once humiliated, was now teaching the city about dignity. After the conference, messages poured in. People from across the country sent notes of support, praising her courage. Parents told their children about her story. Teachers used her words in classrooms to explain fairness and respect. At home, Lila finally felt lighter. She sat on her bed that night, looking at her books stacked neatly on her desk. They had fallen in the square when her world had turned upside down, but now they sat upright, as if symbolizing the strength she had regained. She smiled faintly and whispered, "I am stronger than I thought." Her mother peeked into her room, smiling warmly. "Time for bed, "My strong girl," she said softly. Lila nodded, pulling her blanket around her. As she closed her eyes, she felt peace. The humiliation no longer weighed her down. Instead, she carried pride, not just for herself but for what her story had done for others. In the days that followed, the city continued to talk. But the story was no longer about two arrogant officers. It was about a girl who stood quietly, endured with dignity, and then spoke with courage. It was about a mayor who defended her daughter but also reminded the whole city about fairness. It was about change slow, but possible. And so, the story of that afternoon became more than just a headline. It became a lesson. Parents told it to their children, teachers spoke of it in classrooms, and people remembered it every time they walked through the town square. For Lila, life slowly returned to normal. She still walked home from school with her books in her arms, still wore her uniform, still hummed softly under her breath. But she no longer lowered her head when she walked. She held it high, her step steady, her heart strong. Because she knew something now, something no humiliation could erase. She was not small. She was not powerless. She was the daughter of the mayor, yes. But more importantly, she was a girl who had found her voice. And that voice had changed everything.